you.
Okay. So today's topic, the biggest lie and the greatest truth. Uh, Actually, all of us place a lot of importance on honesty, don't we? We make it a point not to tell lies as much as possible. We inculcate this value in our children also. And then sometimes we do tell white lies, like I could not come to your wedding because I was not well or something. It maybe we have just forgotten or something like that. But by and large, we try to be very honest in our dealings with people. So what do I mean when I give the topic, the biggest lie, the greatest truth? I'm basing this entire presentation on Vedanta. Last week we had a wonderful presentation by Dr. Timappa Hegde on the Bhagavad Gita, and today it's not going to be very different, except that we are going to focus on the main truth of Vedanta. So I would at the outset like to offer my pranams to the source of inspiration. Okay, I think you can see Sri Shankaracharya, Sri Ramana Maharshi, and Sri Narsimha Prabhuji, who is the founder of Light of the Self Foundation, who is guiding me on the direct path of self-inquiry. I would like to begin the presentation with Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Asatoma Satkamaya. Keeping your keeping your device on mute, you can join me in the chanting. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo, Maheshwara, Gurur Sakshat, Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri, Gurave Namaha, Asatoma, Sadgamaya, Tamasoma, Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us offer our pranams to the great masters of wisdom. May their grace and blessings be always with us, lighting the lamp of awareness within us. We have heard so many beautiful prayers today from different religions. Thank you to all the satsangis who offered these prayers. Every prayer in essence says the same thing. Asatoma Satkamaya. From untruth, lead me to truth. But what is untruth and what is truth? Sat, Satya or Sat, according to Vedanta, means that which never changes, which is always permanent, which has no birth, no death, because it has always existed, it will continue to exist, and it exists right now. It undergoes no modification at all. So that we call Sat or Satya. We call Asat that which keeps on changing. Now, over the past 2 or 3 months, how much has our life changed? Ever since the coronavirus came and we have this pandemic and we have the lockdown, we have been experiencing so much of change, drastic change in lifestyle. Keep to your own house, maintain social distancing, manage without help at home, no cook, no maid, work from home, don't travel by public transport. So many things, not just in Bangalore or in India, all over the world it's happening. So we see that this outer world, outer life, outer situations, outer circumstances, these are constantly changing. So Vedanta is saying, from the changing, move towards the changeless. So as I began this session, and I was thinking about what to share with everybody. I remembered this story. This is narrated to us by Swami Ramatirtha. Ramatirtha was a great ascetic who also passed away like Swami Vivekananda at an early age of around 32. But before he passed away, he took the message of Vedanta to Japan and America. And he made Vedanta very easy for them to understand by using a lot of stories and metaphors. So I'm taking one of the stories that he has narrated. This is an actual incident which Swami Ramatirtha himself witnessed. So he is saying that he had a friend called Sheikh Sahib, who lived in a town called Sialkot in India. And this is in the 1800s. So during this time when we are looking at the story, in Sialkot, there was a lot of robbery and theft going on. So much theft was going on that finally the police were not able to deal with it. And the British government was ruling at the time. So the Britishers sent an expert called Mr. Warburton to deal with these thefts. So what Mr. Warburton did was, he first made a list of all the suspects. You know, in those days, towns were small, so people knew each other, not like we do today. So he made a list of people saying, okay, this person, this person, this person. He had a list. So he went to all these suspicious people who could be suspected of thievery, and he told them, you have a choice. Either I put you into jail right away as a preventive measure, or you can come and report to the police station 5 times a day, so that I'm sure that you're not into mischief, you're not stealing. And once he began the system, thefts really came down. So in this circumstance, we have Sheikh Sahib staying there in Sialkot, and Sheikh Sahib was in a state of total surrender to God. Always in a state of total surrender. But the peculiar thing was, he never went to the mosque to perform namaz. And his friends, one day, many friends, they decided, today we will make Sheikh Sahib come with us to the mosque for namaz. We will convince him somehow, we will persuade him. So they came to his house and they started compelling him, you must come with us today for namaz. So he made a very peculiar statement. He said, I will quote what Mr. Warburton has been saying. Why should I report to the police station 5 times a day when I am not a thief? His friends were very puzzled. They said, we really don't understand. You are talking about something else, we are talking about something different. So Sheikh Sahib said, no, we are talking about the same thing. Now this body is there, and this mind is there, and this intellect is there. I believe, I know for a fact that these don't belong to me. They belong to Allah. Allah made them. He has just given them to me on a lease. So I never ever live my life based on the belief that this body, mind, and intellect belong to me. I'm always thinking of Allah. And because of that, this body, mind, and intellect will not commit any sins. And since these BMI, body, mind, and intellect, don't commit any sins, I don't see the reason to go to the mosque and say, Allah, forgive me for all my sins, help me to do the right things every day, etc. Because Allah is always taking care of that. But finally, one day, I will do namaz. And when I do namaz, I will offer this body to Allah, and it will never get up from namaz. And Swami Ramatirtha says this is exactly what happened. On the last day of Sheikh Sahib's life, he bowed down in namaz and he never got up. It was his final offering. So from this story, what do we understand? It takes us to a shloka of Upadesha Saram. Upadesha Saram is a composition of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi. He first composed it in Tamil then he himself translated it into Sanskrit. So it's a beautiful roadmap for every seeker. I find myself amazed every time I recollect the 30 shlokas. Only in 30 shlokas, Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi has given us a roadmap of the Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, of Raja Yoga, control of mind, and then 15 shlokas, the last 15 shlokas are on Atma Vichara or Jnana Marga. So in the 22nd shloka, I'm just going to chant it. Vikrahendriya prasad tajjadam yasat. So here Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi is saying Vigraha, that is senses, prana, the life force, dhi, intellect, tamaha, ignorance. Here by tamaha, he is referring to the state of deep sleep. Na aham tajjadam. They are all inert. Tat jadam. They are all inert. Na aham. They are not that self. Ekasat, which is the only truth. So if I read out the translation, the I or the self, which is the only truth or reality, is not the body, senses, breath, intellect, or ignorance. These are all inert and illusory. By illusory, we need to understand the word mithya. Mithya does not mean untruth. Mithya means that which appears to exist but does not actually exist. Maya also means the same thing. So this body appears to exist, but it does not really exist. How is that? Let us see. If we move on to the next slide, Vigraha, Vigrahendriya, remember the shloka. So Vigraha is the body. If you are looking at the body, then we see in this slide, there is an old woman looking at the mirror. And in the mirror, she's remembering how she looked when she maybe about 50 years ago or 60 years ago. Young, beautiful, very healthy, very alert, fit. So the body keeps on changing. We know how quickly the body changes. When we were born, we were so small, barely 2 feet in height, and weight maybe about 2.5, 3 kgs. Now we know how much the weight is, maybe 60, 70, if we are very lucky, 50 kgs. So we have sickness, we have old age, we have death, we have birth. So by the definition of Sat, that means no birth, no change. The body is Asat. It is ever changing. And if we look at the mind, what about the mind? If you look at this picture, half the face is sad and half the face is happy. So this keeps happening to us through the day, from the time we wake up till the time we go to sleep. We don't know the gamut of emotions we would have gone through. We call the mind very moody because the smallest thing can make it elated, and the smallest thing can also bring it down into the dumps. Looking at the intellect. Intellect is, it has so much of knowledge and maturity. My intellect was making so many decisions. So what am I saying? This is also me, this is also me, this is also me. There is some continuity. The body has come. Then to what am I saying? To which eternal factor am I referring? So here, Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi in Upadesha Saram, he says there is I, the single I. The single I refers to BMI, body, mind, and intellect, which is always changing. And then he says there is a I hyphen I, to give it continuity. So this I hyphen I, that is the substratum of awareness. It is like a, if you think of a necklace, suppose I'm wearing a necklace of beautiful beads, all of different colors. The beads are all discrete things, they're all separate things. But what gives that necklace a form, a shape, a continuity is the thread which is holding them together. So this I is the constant feeling, the awareness that is holding all these changing images together. Now, if we come to our day-to-day experience, all of us go through three states. Vedanta always explains truths by referring to our own experience, and it frequently refers to our experience of deep sleep, dream state, and wakeful state, also called Sushupti, Jagrata, and Sapnavastha. So, if we see, we have a nice sleep. Let's say yesterday I had a very, very nice deep sleep. I had gone for a long walk and I was tired. I came home, I slept really well. So in the morning, what will I say? I had a beautiful sleep. So suppose somebody comes and asks me, you had a beautiful sleep. What was beautiful in it? Was there some beautiful object in your sleep? No. Were you there in your sleep? Or was his body there? Was I there? Somebody, your daughter is asking, was I there in your sleep, Mama? No. Was your body there? Was a beautiful set of pajamas that you are wearing, were they there? Was this beautiful house there in your sleep? No. None of the things which we know in our waking life, all of them disappear when we sleep. So when we go to sleep, actually, it is a state of surrender, you can say, because we are letting go of the known. We are letting go of this body, this name, this biodata, this mind, intellect, qualifications, skills, bank account, relationships. We are letting go of all that, and then we go into a state of nothingness, no thingness. No things that we know in the wakeful state, in our waking state, is there in the deep sleep state. So suppose when in the middle of my sleep, I have a dream. So in that dream, I'm sitting somewhere, somebody has invited me to dinner, I'm sitting there, I'm having beautiful food, and as I'm eating that food, very tasty, I wake up. When I wake up, do I wake up with that plate of beautiful food in my hands? No, it has disappeared. In my dream, that food was very real. I could smell the masala dosa. I could taste the masala dosa. I could feel and touch it. I could see it. A beautiful golden brown in color. But when I'm awake, as soon as I woke up, the whole thing disappeared. It was not there anymore. So in my wakeful state, my dream seems to be very unreal. My deep sleep seems to be a totally different state. And yet, I say I slept well, I had a dream, I am wide awake. Who is that I am referring to? What gives continuity to these three states, which seem to be mutually exclusive of each other? In deep sleep, the waking state and all the things that I know in waking state are gone. In dream, there are a completely different dream body and a dream world and dream happenings, which all seem real at the time, but as soon as I wake up, I realize they don't exist. And then in the waking state, the deep sleep state is not there, neither is the dream state. So they're all mutually exclusive of each other. Yet there is some witness, there is some substratum of awareness, which is telling me it was I who slept, it was I who had a dream, it is I who am awake right now. So this I, or the self, that is the substratum of awareness. I thought before we proceed proceed further, we could just do a small meditation, just about 2 or 3 minutes. Can you close your eyes? Just make yourself comfortable. Close your eyes. Now visualize that you are in a dark room. You have your eyes open. The room is pitch dark. You can't see anything. It's a strange place. You've just gone into the room. You've never gone into that room before. And suddenly the lights have gone off everywhere. You can't see anything inside the room. It's dark. And from outside, somebody is asking you, what is there in front of you? Is there a table? You say, I don't know. I need light to see. Is there a chair? I don't know. I need light to see. And that person asks you, are you there? Do you need light to see that? Do you say, no, first I have to shine a torch and see if I am there. Let me touch if my body, I can feel my body, then I'm there. Or if I can smell the perfume I sprayed on this morning, I'm there. If I can taste the sweet which I was sucking just before coming here, if it's still in my mouth, then I'm there. No, we don't say that. If I talk, then I hear my voice, then I know I'm there. Do we need any of these? Do we need the senses to know that we are there? So if I ask you right now, your eyes are closed, are you there? You know that you are there. I am. I exist. With your eyes closed, just stay with that one direct experience, a feeling of certainty. I exist. I am. As soon as you can open your eyes now. As soon as we go to this I am, Sri Shankaracharya calls it aparoksha anubhuti, direct experience, for which no proof is required. You don't say, when somebody says, are you there? You don't search for your passport or Aadhaar card or some proof, either sensorial or documentary or any kind of proof, because you know intuitively, directly that you exist. There is never a little bit of doubt also about it at any point of time. So this certainty that I exist, I am, that is Sat Chit. We say we are Sat Chit Ananda. The self is Sat Chit Ananda. So Sat means existence. I exist. Chit means knowledge or consciousness. I am conscious that I exist. I am aware that I exist. So I am. That is Sat and Chit. Ananda comes from Ananta. Ananta means infinite. As long as I believe that I am this body, mind, and intellect, which most of us, including me, we do believe as long as we are awake. We say, whenever we say I, we are referring to the body, mind, and intellect. It's a strong belief. Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi says that belief that I am the body, mind, and intellect is nothing but a thought. Every belief is a thought. So the belief that I am the body, mind, and intellect, this constant identification with BMI, it is nothing but a thought. And in deep sleep, this thought is in suspension. So we feel infinite. In your deep sleep, do you feel, do any of us have a limit? This is me and this is not me. Do you feel that there are two entities in deep sleep? No. We feel that there is only one and that is infinite. There is no limitation. But as soon as I wake up, first, the first thought that comes is the first awareness that manifests inside us is I am, I exist. And then that I am will start attaching itself to things. The first thing it attaches itself to is BMI. I am this body, I am this mind, I am this intellect, the three instruments. And then it will say, I am this name, I am an engineer, or I am a doctor, I am a lawyer, or I am a homemaker. Now I have to do this, and then we are now tied up with body, mind, and intellect and the world outside. So this identification with body, mind, and intellect, which we experience most of the time because of the belief that I feel I am these three instruments, that limits us. As long as we are limited, I say I am this, immediately the next thing comes, I am not this. So I am not my spouse, I am not my wife, I am not my, or I am not any of the people I know, I am not the world that is outside. This separation comes. And God is different, I am different. World is different, I am different. So this dichotomy comes in. The minute this limitation of I am the body, mind, and intellect comes, then the rest of samsara comes in. Samsara comes in because the minute I identify with body, mind, and intellect, anything that happens to the body, mind, and intellect can make me happy or unhappy. Because I feel I'm the body, something happens to the body, something good happens, I'm happy. Something bad happens, I'm unhappy. Same thing with the mind and the intellect. So this feeling of limitedness, finiteness, that is what gives us, keeps us away from ananda or bliss. The minute we stop identifying with the body, mind, and intellect, then we become unlimited, we become infinite, we become one. When there is only one, when there is no other, there can be no suffering. So this is what Vedanta is telling us. This is what Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi is telling us. This brings me to the another story narrated by Swami Ramtirtha. This is the story of the boy on the roof. This is again a true story. There was this boy who was living with Swami Ramatirtha for several years. And through association with the wonderful sage, he became intoxicated with self-knowledge. And one day, in his intoxication, he climbed up to a very tall mansion. Standing on the terrace, he was proclaiming loudly, I am God, I am God. And people gathered around that house because he was shouting loudly. So many people gathered on the street. And then one of them said, okay, if you're God, then you prove it. You prove it by jumping down from that mansion, which is about 5 stories high. You jump down from there. And if you are not hurt and if you don't die, then we will believe that you're God. Come on, do it. So this boy is standing on the roof. And then he says, okay, you ask me to jump down into any abyss or any valley, also I can jump. It's not a big thing. But please tell me, when I'm everywhere all the time, from where to where shall I jump? When I'm everywhere all the time, then from where to where can I jump? So Swami Ramtirtha is saying, this is the state of the Jnani. The Jnani never identifies with the body, mind, or intellect. He is always aware that he is the self. So we have come to a shloka by Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya. This is a very, very famous 2 lines from the shloka, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Na Paraha. Again and again it is quoted as the essence of Advaita Vedanta. Brahma Satyam. Brahma actually in Sanskrit comes from Bhauma, or Brahma means very, very, very large, vast, so vast and so large that it is infinite. Infinity means only one object can be infinite. Can we have two things which are infinite? Then neither of them are infinite. By definition itself, infinity means one. Brahma means that which is infinite. That means it is present everywhere, all the time. It has no beginning, no end, no change, no modification. So that is the self. That is what each one of us are. We know the Mahavakyas, Tat Tvam Asi, you are that. So I am, the minute it attaches itself to the body, mind and intellect, we become limited. We identify with it and we become limited. But the Jnani, who has done continuous contemplation on his true nature, he understands, he realizes the truth which has always been so, I am Brahman. Even right now, as we are all sitting here listening, discussing, contemplating, we are that. We are awareness. We are that continuous substratum of our awareness which never changes. We are Satchitananda. But we have not realized it. We have not established ourselves in that truth. Whereas a Jnani, he understands clearly Brahma Satyam. When we are listening to a satsang, yes, we do understand Brahma Satyam. Brahman only exists, self only exists, I am the self. We understand this. We really understand this very well. But after we go out from the satsang, or after we have closed reading, read it in a book and we have kept it aside, and after some time, something happens, somebody comes and does something that irritates us, they come and say, are you a fool? Why did you do this? Then immediately, Brahma Satyam, I am Brahman, I am the self, that we slip away from that awareness and we identify with the body, mind and intellect, and we start saying, no, no, I didn't do it. Why are you saying these things to me, etc., etc., etc. So a Jnani never ever slips from the state of awareness. That is why he is called a Jnani. Though that state is true both for him and for us, there is no change there. The Jnani is constantly aware of his true identity, whereas we now and then become aware of the state of true identity, maybe when we pray, maybe when we meditate, maybe when we feel very quiet inside, maybe when we have gone to the Himalayas and we are looking at great beauty around us, or we are listening to music, or we are chanting, or we are doing sadhana. Maybe for some time we are aware that I am the self, but we slip from that state of awareness. That is the only difference between the Jnani and the Ajnani. So the Jnani is saying Brahma Satyam. Brahman is the only truth. The self is the only truth. Jagat Mithya. Mithya means it appears to exist. This body, mind and intellect, in the waking state, it appears to exist, but in deep sleep, what happened to it? It disappeared. If it had been constant, if it had been true, if it had been unchanging, then it should not have disappeared. Whereas the substratum of awareness, which was there in waking state, is also there in deep sleep state, it is also there in dream state. Right now, if we are telling ourselves, I know this Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, I have heard this before, that the feeling I know this, that is coming from awareness, that is coming from the self. So the self is so much a part of our day-to-day experience that we tend to ignore it. The minute we know something, in order to know something, this principle of knowing or awareness has to operate. Otherwise, we cannot know anything. So the minute I say, I know this, then self is operating. Even when I say, I don't know this, I know that I don't know this. So the principle of self is operating. So constantly the principle of self is operating every moment in our life. It has become so customary to us, we ignore it. This is what is called ignorance. Ignoring the self, which is always present, which is always me. but still ignoring it and focusing on the temporary and ignoring or neglecting the permanent. That is called ignorance. So Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya. Mithya means it appears to exist, but in actuality, it is only a wave on the ocean of consciousness. Jivo Brahmaiva na paraha. Jivo, all the jivas, all the individuals, you, me, everybody else who are saying, I am different, I am the body, mind and intellect. Every single jiva, every single individual is nothing but the self, nothing but Brahman alone, nothing else. But we have ignored that fact. We have forgotten that fact. We are unaware of that fact. We keep slipping from the awareness of I am Brahman. Anena Vedyam Satchastram. Understand, Vedyam, understand that this is what every Shastra is saying. Iti Vedanta Dhindhimaha. Vedanta is proclaiming this loudly, just like beating drums and making announcements in the street. That is Dhindhima. So Vedanta Dhindhima is proclaiming constantly, you are not the body, mind and intellect. They are your instruments. They are a wave on the ocean of consciousness. You are the ocean. You are not the wave. You are Brahman. You are infinite. You are Satchitananda. So in Atma Bodha, Shloka 36, Atma Bodha again is authored by Sri Shankaracharya. Atma Bodha and Tattva Bodha, to which Tattva Bodha, Dr. Hegde was also referring to it last week. These are two basic texts, Vedantic texts. It is good to read Atma Bodha and Tattva Bodha because they set forth all the concepts, all the definitions of Vedanta, so that a student of Vedanta, after reading these, if we read the Upanishads or Gita or Brahma Sutras or any other treatise, it is easier for us to understand. So in the Atma Bodha, Sri Shankaracharya is describing what is the self. He says it is Nitya. Nitya means always the same, ever the same, ever there. Shuddha, ever pure. Vimukta, ever free. Ekam, it is just one without a second. Akhanda, it is indivisible. Anandam, it is eternal bliss. Advayam, it is never two. Satyam, it is never changing. Jnanam, it is always awareness, total awareness, nothing but awareness. Anantam, it is infinite. Yat Parabrahma Ahameva Tat. This kind of Parabrahman, I am. So this is not about just a sage or a saint or a jnani. It is about each one of us. Advaita is a very intimate science. The most intimate science there can be is what I find. The more I delve deeper into it, the more I find it is talking only about me, not somebody else, not something else, not something abstract. It is about each one of us. So Vedanta is telling us again and again, this is me, this is you, this is your true state. I will just end with one story, if I may, Sadhni. So
yes, please do.
So if we think of the entire world and this instrument of body, mind and intellect and all the world around us, it is also an appearance of consciousness. It is not different from consciousness, but it is a ever changing appearance. It comes and it goes, just to go. So Jagat means that which keeps being born and getting destroyed. It's a continuous cycle going on and on. So this Jagat is an appearance of the Lord, but you can think of it as his army maybe. And the consciousness, which is the substratum, the self, that is the Lord himself, that is each one of us. So this story where we are familiar, it is from the Mahabharata, where just the war is going to start now, no peace making has succeeded, war is certain. So on one side, Duryodhana is going around asking kings, please come and support me, lend me your army, fight with me. and the Pandavas are doing the same thing. So one day, both Arjuna and Duryodhana have come to ask Krishna to lend his support to them. When they come, Lord Krishna is sleeping, and Duryodhana comes first. He doesn't want to wake Krishna. He sits down on a chair near his head. A little while later, Arjuna comes. He also doesn't want to wake Krishna. He sits down near the feet of Krishna. And then Krishna wakes up. And then he sees Arjuna first. He says, "Oh, Arjuna, welcome. When did you come?" And then Duryodhana also says, "I am also here, Krishna." So Krishna says, "Very good. Why have you come?" So Arjuna says, "I came to request you to help us during the war." And Krishna asks Duryodhana, "Why did you come?" Duryodhana says, "I came for the same thing." So Krishna says, "Okay, both of you have come for the same thing." Then Duryodhana says, "I would like you to know, Krishna, that I came first. And I came first before Arjuna. So you should give me opportunity to ask you what I want first." And Krishna says, "Maybe you came first, Duryodhana, but I saw Krishna first because he was sitting there and he is also younger than you. So let us give him the first opportunity. But before any of you ask anything, let me tell you, now on one side, I have 1 million, that means 10 lakh soldiers. On one side will be 10 lakh soldiers fighting. And wherever the army goes, I will not go there. I will go to the opposite party. And I will not fight. I will not handle weapons. I will only advise. So now, Arjuna, you choose first." Without any hesitation, Arjuna says, "Krishna, I want you. I don't care whether you fight or not. I don't want your army. I want you." Duryodhana is elated. Said, "Krishna, I want your army." So both of them go away happy. Duryodhana with Krishna's army, Arjuna with Krishna. Now, every moment of our life, we have the same, we are standing at these crossroads. Are we selecting the army or are we selecting the Lord or the self? If we identify with body, mind, and intellect, giving it the greatest importance, giving the world around us the greatest importance, then we are choosing Krishna's army. But if all the time we are doing Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasa, there are two paths. Vedantic path will say keep on listening from a Sadguru to the truth of your true nature. Shravana, keep on contemplating upon that. Instead of thinking idle thoughts, think of your true nature. And Nididhyasa, safeguard that awareness that has been given to you by the Guru. Nidhi is the treasure. Dhyasa, protect. Protect that treasure of awareness. I am the self all the time. So that is the Vedantic path. And then we have the direct path or the path of Atma Vichara. At every juncture, please keep asking yourself, who am I, says Ramana. Who am I? I am unhappy. Who is unhappy? I am unhappy. Who am I? So that will take you back to awareness of the self. So one of these two things, to keep on giving priority to the self. We never forget our own name. It becomes so much a part of us, isn't it? We don't forget at any time. I don't have to keep, as soon as I get up, I'm Vani, I'm Vani. I don't say 100 times so that I remember through the day. No, it is there. So like that, once we listen to this Vedantic truth, you are that, you are the self, you are consciousness, you are ever free. That is the greatest truth. And that I should make it so much a part of me that it never slips away. Then I'm choosing the Lord. But if I keep forgetting that, I keep slipping back to my identity of I am the body, mind, and intellect. I am the body, mind, and intellect is the greatest, biggest lie. And we believe it. We believe it with heart and soul, I can say, though I'm not saying soul in the technical sense. We believe it so much, it is a part of us. So Vedanta is saying, let that go. That is true sannyasa. Discarding the belief I am the body, mind, and intellect, which is just a thought, which has taken great root in your mind through so many lifetimes. Discard that belief, that thought. Then what remains is the self. And self is Satchitananda, ever blissful, ever free, ever peaceful. That is your true state. Thank you.
Thank you, Vani. Any questions? Please raise your hand or write them on the chat.
How will I see the chat?
Okay.
Okay.
Nobody on the chat as yet. So are there any questions? If not, we will move on.
Okay. Gayatri? No? How to sustain the thought of Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithyam. Okay. The first thing here is giving importance to it. When we give importance to something, we don't have to make so much of an effort to sustain it. How important is sustaining this thought? For instance, suppose we've all had this experience, most of us maybe, when we were young, we fell in love with the person who was our spouse, or we fell in love with a girlfriend or with a boyfriend. So did we make an effort to think of that person? Automatically, whatever we are doing, the thought of that person is always there within us. For a mother cooking in the kitchen, it's a Vedantic example that is often given. She's cooking in the kitchen, but a baby is sleeping in the room. Half the mind is always with the baby. So first of all, to be convinced of the truth. Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithyam. We have to be convinced. So Vedanta puts forward many things to convince us, talking about different states of consciousness. So to keep reading, to keep listening, and to pay importance to it, and to think of it. Now, what is important here is once we understand Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithyam, once we are convinced of it, to look at all our belief system in the light of Vedanta. So in the light of Vedanta, if I'm looking at myself, I'm suffering about something, I'm angry about something, I'm hurt about something. But this thought, if I bring forward, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithyam, I am not this body, mind and intellect. I am the self. I am ever happy. I am ever blissful. I am peaceful. I am infinite. Then this I become convinced I am not a body, mind, intellect. I'm not saying it is very easy, but actually it is simple. The more mumukshutva, the stronger the desire is for us to sustain it, the easier it becomes. And having a Sadguru is of immense help on the path, because a Sadguru is a realized jnani, and from the state of realization, he is telling us Brahma Satyam Jagat. So when we hear it from the jnani, it has a special energy, and that also helps.
Thank you. Any other questions?
We are so caught up with our daily problems and situations. For us to be in that focus, yes, with the help of the Guru, we might be able to achieve something. When you're having a very busy day and you have to live in this external world, how do we
Can you
on this
give
aspect?
me a particular example of a situation?
Now, for example, if I have a little baby, I have a 2-year-old baby who's constantly taking my attention. Could be my grandchild, could be my child. And the whole day I'm supposed to look after the child, and I'm having the whole my hands full. There is a maid servant, there is to be taken care of, the entire house to be taken care of, breakfast, lunch, dinner, everything to be made ready. And you are in a very busy state. And in under such circumstances, how do you how is it possible for us to or rather, how do we make it a practice to work on this point,
first of all,
as you
I would say do an analysis of your own temperament first. Do you have a devotional temperament? Or
yes,
if you have a devotional temperament, then start seeing the Lord in everybody around you.
Yeah.
Now you have this baby. You're talking about a 2-year-old baby. So it is a baby Krishna or a baby Devi or whatever is your Ishta Devata, that is there in the form of a baby. It's easy because a baby is very innocent, very lovable.
All right.
So in everybody, if you start seeing the Lord, your Ishta Devata, whatever japa you're doing, start seeing them and start serving the Lord in everybody. So if you're of a devotional temperament, take refuge in devotion. If you are of a karma yoga temperament, that means you like doing action, then again, by doing action for somebody, don't look, you say, I want to benefit that person, I want to benefit this person. And I'm not saying that we don't slip. Exactly. We are so used to thinking like that, no? We are so used to becoming stressed. We are so used to thinking in certain ways. The brain is hardwired. If you are a jnani, then think of everything as an appearance of consciousness. That's what I try to do. For me, Atma Vichara is my path. So when I start getting angry with somebody, when I get stressed out, then I remember that person is also myself. This person is also myself. Then what am I getting angry for? What am I getting irritated about? So there is no difference. I am identifying with this BMI, but actually when I identify with the self, then everybody is a representation or a manifestation of the self. That is why when Vivekananda asked Swami Ramakrishna, when Ramakrishna had cancer of the esophagus, and then he could not even swallow one spoon of, then Vivekananda was so disturbed and he said, you please ask the Divine Mother to allow you to eat, no? So Ramakrishna, next time when he met Vivekananda a few hours later, he said, I asked the Divine Mother, what did she say? She said, you are eating through millions of mouths. Do you want to eat with this mouth also?
That's lovely.
I'm not saying it is easy. We keep slipping.
That's right. No, it is not easy.
At the
but
same
I wanted to
time,
know how
you
the
need
practice.
an anchor. You need an anchor.
Yes, you need a guru.
Keep coming back to the anchor, not just the guru.
Okay.
The strong yearning to stay centered. So depending on your temperament, whatever appeals to you, whatever comes easily to you, take refuge in that. And when you slip, come back. When you slip, come back.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, ma'am. It's a lovely piece of, it's something which is very practically doable. Somewhere a little bit, at least we can move ahead. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Any more questions? I don't think so.
Yes.
So
After, I have some question.
Yes, please ask.
Yes, after we die, can we become a plant or animal or human being in the next birth?
A jnani would ask, who dies? Who dies? So if we believe that we are the body, mind and intellect, then the body dies. Attachment to the body, mind and intellect, to the body, it is like, let me give a simple example. If you, suppose I'm staying in a rented house, and then my landlord tells me, okay, you need to vacate this house. So if I vacate the house, will I be happy staying on the street? I don't want that. So immediately what do? When he gives me notice, I start looking for another house. From this house, I don't move into the street, I move into another house. So as long as I am attached to the body, mind and intellect, I identify with the body, mind and intellect. When I lose one body through death, immediately I look for another body. So I will seek another body and get into that. So if we get into metaphysics, then Vedanta says, Shankaracharya actually in his treatises, he says, when you have 50% good karma and 50% bad karma, equal good karma, equal bad karma, you will get a human birth. If your karmic balance goes down, that means more than 50% good karma gets lower than 50%, and this climbs up, bad karma climbs up, you can get into any other body. That is how Vedanta says. But theosophy, from the Theosophical Society, they say once you come into the human birth, that consciousness cannot go back into a lower form. So for us, actually, this is not that important. What is important is right now, what are we? How can we be happy? How can we realize our true nature? For a jnani who realizes his true nature, who is established in his true nature, there is no birth after this body dies. So we should concentrate more on realizing our true state, getting established in the true state, rather than going into metaphysics, though it is interesting sometimes to go into it.
Thank you very much.